Welcome back, everybody, to part number 12 of our episode 12 of our series on how to build an advanced blog in CMS. So today we are going to continue working towards managing roles and permissions, and in order to do that, we need to be able to manage users. So we're going to build a interface now to basically create users, view our users, update them, edit them, and delete them. So just your basic CRUD. Shouldn't be anything too crazy or different, but we'll just be doing that now. So when we click manage users, I want to be able to have an interface here that basically just displays all the users. We'll list probably the 10 most recent users, and then paginate the rest, and then we'll have buttons to go in and manage each of them. And then we'll want to have a search in here as well to search for users. We will deploy search probably in a future video. Well, yes, for sure in a future video. I'm not sure at what point we will, but I don't want to clutter it too much with different concepts in the same video. So we'll get search up and running, and we'll have our own video for that. And then we can come back and add search to our users page. But that's really what it is. Then we need a page to edit our users, change basic settings and so forth. And then we will want to be able to maybe delete them or soft delete them. So that's all we're focusing on for today's video. All right, so here we are in our code base. And actually, the first thing that we're going to want to do, let's see, we actually already have our user model, so we're good there. And then the next thing we're going to want to have is a controller to manage our users. So this is going to be a controller that we can use for all the basic CRUD functions. So let's go ahead and make that controller now, and we'll start working through that. So back over here at our terminal, let's create that. And then we'll run that. So now that we got that, we've got our basic, oh shoot, we forgot to, let's run this again. I'm gonna delete this. Let's run this again and do it with a resource now. Of course, when we delete it manually, we have to dump auto load. There we go. Okay, so now let's run it again. So up here, let's run it, but instead, let's run it with the flag of -- resource. There we go. Okay, so now we should have one, and it should have all of the basic CRUD functions. Okay, cool. So now what we can do is we can actually add this users resource routes inside of our routes file. So let's see, routes, web, and then inside of here, we'll do route resource / users. Okay, so there we go. We have all of the routes that we wanted. So now let's go through and start creating them. So inside of our resources, our views, inside of manage, let's create another folder called users. And then our first file will be indexed. Now, let's go back to our controller real quick, and we'll just return this. So now this will display the page, and then we'll just extend our manage. All right, so now let's go ahead and just, let me make that link work. All right, so we do have one little problem I forgot to do in the previous video, which is basically we need to wrap all of our content. Since this sidebar is fixed to the left, we need to push all of our content over the width of this sidebar. So it'll be 200 pixels. So we need to have a margin for the entire content area. We'll want to do this in the in the main layout template. So over here. So when we do main, you can see here, this is our main content. We've got it wrapped with an ID of app. Let's just give this also a class of, we'll say management area. And then we'll go and just add that into our CSS. Under manage, that's where all of our management stuff is. So we'll just have management area. So guys, I actually had to pause the video real quick to make a work-related phone call. And then I forgot to resume recording after I came back. So I ended up doing a bunch of stuff off camera, and I don't really want to go through and do it again. So I'm just going to show you. So I changed the CSS quite a bit just to get our layout working a little bit better. So now it's working the way I want it to work. So yeah, we did a little bit of CSS changing inside of the manage.scss file. Did that off screen. Sorry about that. Let's continue. Okay, so now for the next section, I think what I'm just going to do here is just create a table to show all of our users. So let's see here. We've got our columns. Let's just go ahead and add an HR, and then we'll add our table down here. So this will be our tabled section. Okay, so that's basically really all we need, I guess, for our table. We'll just have our name, email, the date the user was created, and then some actions like edit and so forth. In the future, we'll have probably more information about a user, but that's basically what we need right now. Okay, so great. So now that we got that, we'll actually want to start filling out the table with our information. So okay, so there we go. That's the basics. Let's go ahead and wrap this now inside of a loop. And now we should make sure we're actually passing this in, and then we'll test it in the browser. So let's go now and pass in this user's item, and then we'll be good to go to test. Okay, so now up here, what we'll do is we're going to say users equals user. Right now, we'll just do user all. That'll be good for now. We'll paginate here in a second. Make sure we also use like that. Okay, so now we should be good. Let's go ahead and test this. Perfect. Okay, so I kind of messed this up. I forgot there was a column called date created. So let's do that. And then let's also wrap this, just to make it look a little nicer, let's wrap this table in a card. And then down here we need one more TD, and this is going to be the date created. Okay, so that now it should look a lot better. Let's take a look again. There we go. So now this looks like it's a little tile and then or whatever, and we have all of our users. We could also add another class in here. Where's this table? I think this is narrow is a Bulma class. There we go. That actually cleans it up a little bit. Okay, so there we go. So now we got this is looking pretty good. We can edit a user here, and it should take us to the right page. Of course, this will not work because we have a route created, but we haven't actually defined this. And we have a method, we have an action in our controller, but we don't have it doing anything. So it just renders a white page. But it at least does take us to the right place. You can see it's editing the user 1, editing user 3, and so forth. So it is working. This is, I think, good to go for right now. I might clean this up at some point, but for right now, I think we're doing the job. So pagination is easy enough to do up here. Let's okay, so pagination is working. The one thing that's not working right now is just the styling of the pagination. We'll have to customize this because by default, this when you just run users links like this, by default, it's actually just going to run as a it renders it basically for Bootstrap. We're not using Bootstrap, using Bulma. So once again, we need to customize the view that this comes in. So what we'll want to do is just kind of export that view or render that view, and then we can customize it as needed. So we'll go into our terminal to do that. Gonna go ahead and publish that. And now we should have inside of our views folder, we will have another folder called vendor, pagination, and then here we go. We've got the pagination here. We'll want to be using default, and then we'll just customize this as needed. All right, now I think we got it. Let's try it in the browser. Pagination is centered, and I think that'll work. Yeah, that works good enough for me. Okay, let's add some margin on top and we're good to go. Margin top, we'll do 20. Good enough. All right, I'm happy with that. Yeah, so the downside with like what we're doing right now is I actually don't want to spend too much time working on like perfecting the user interface, but just need to make it usable. I'm not actually planning on coming in and manually creating a lot of users or anything like that. So I basically need to be functional, but it doesn't need to be perfect. So I don't want to waste too much time making something like this perfect because it just really doesn't need to be. All right, so now that we have that, let's fix the pagination. I moved this down to only paginate 2 items just so we could see what it looks like with multiple, with pagination. So let's move this back to like the default of like 10. So back in our user controller, let's paginate back again for 10 users. But now our pagination will go away just because there's nothing to paginate. Okay, now they're in reverse order as well, so we want to see the oldest or the newest users first. That's just by default, but then we can paginate through them, and eventually we will have a search function as well. All right, now let's generate a form so that we can create a new user. And then once we create the new user, we'll want to have an easy way to display the user and then edit the user. And I think I'll not worry about delete right now because I don't really have any intention on deleting users. So we really don't need to worry about that too much. Okay, so now for back for the create, all we really need to do is return the view. Nothing exciting. This will be inside of manage.users.create. And then we're going to post to the store method. So under users, let's create a new file. Okay, so what I've done here, basic form, nothing exciting. So we've got our name, text field for the name, another text field for the email, and then a password field. So there's a text field for the password. This is if I want to give a user a specific password. This can be useful if you're doing like customer service and you're like, well, I'll just change your password to be password, but change it back later or something. I can put in a password manually if I'd like, or I can just tell it to auto-generate a password. And what I want to do here is we're going to use view to, by default, keep track of whether this checkbox is checked. If this checkbox is checked to auto-generate a password, we're going to disable this field. If it's unchecked, then we will hide this field, okay? So that's basically what we're going to do here. And that's really all we need, maybe a submit button. Let's take a look in the browser real quick. Some little weird issue up here. And then there's for some reason a semicolon being added to something that shouldn't have a semicolon. Oh, up here. Don't need a semicolon. Okay. There we go. It looks much more natural. Okay, create new user, name, email, password, auto-generate field. And we want to basically, when this is checked, we will basically disable this field. It's probably the best user interface. So let's set that up now. First of all, before we get too crazy with it, let's add just a little bit of space here. There we go. Make it a little more usable. And then, yeah, so now when that's checked, let's bind this now to vModel, and we're going to bind it to auto password. So here we're just going to basically tie auto password right down here, which by default will be checked because most of the time we just want to auto generate a password. So we're going to leave it checked for the most part, and then by default it'll be checked. And then if it's true, we want to basically disable this field. Okay, so now if auto password is true, this will be disabled. If it's not true, then it will be enabled. It's pretty simple. So you check it, yeah, it goes away. So now it is disabled. Now the way that Bulma styles the disabled by default is it just basically makes it the same color. The here is our background. So it looks like it's hidden, but it's actually there. But it doesn't matter. This is good enough for me to go on. So from here, we can basically auto-generate a password by default, or we can hide it. In fact, what we'll probably do instead of disabled, just do a v-if. And now it'll just go away. Oh, but we need the opposite. So there we go. Okay, so if you uncheck that box, now you can insert a password, a manual password. Otherwise, it's hidden. So let's go ahead and actually add a placeholder. And then you would manually give a password to the user. Okay, perfect. So I think that's good. That's really all we need. This all has a name. That has a name. I think everything is done. So now this all will get submitted to the users.store. So now we want to go access that. So back in our controller here, under store. We got to validate this first. So that's basically all we really need to validate, just those two fields, as of right now at least. And then the password we're going to manage down here. So let's actually do the password now. So password equals, well, let's do an if statement. So we'll say if okay, so if that's the case, then that means someone did generate or someone set a password manually. So let's go ahead and define that. So we'll have a variable here called password. We'll just set it equal to request password. Okay, so what I've got here is a random password generator. Basically, it's going to create a 10-digit random password. It's going to use these numbers. I did clean up this field. So basically it has 1 through 9, and then every letter in lowercase and every letter uppercase. I did remove a few letters and numbers that are commonly misunderstood, like, for example, the number 1 with a capital I. The lowercase l is sometimes confused, and the O and the 0 can get confused. So I removed those keys, the ones commonly mixed up, and otherwise left everything in here for basically a random key space that we can work with. Then we've got a variable string. We go through and loop through it 10 times. We're going to make the string and then return it here. And we'll set password equal to it. All right, so that's kind of our password generation. Now when we go to create our user, what we can do is we'll just do our basic stuff. So name will equal request name. Okay, and then we're going to save the user. So that's basically all we need to do. After that, we can, I mean, I guess what we'd probably want to do actually a little bit better would be if, and then we do user save. So if that was successful, then we want to return or redirect. Like that. Otherwise, that means there wasn't an error thrown. Okay, there's our store function. So once again, we validate Then we are going to do some little funkiness here where we basically check to see whether the user had checked that box or not. If they did not check the box and they have making sure that there is actually a password in the field, then we're going to go ahead and just set the password for the user equal to that password that they inputted. However, if they check the box or left it empty or whatever, then we're going to go through and generate a password. We set our password in either case equal to this password variable. Then we create our user like we normally would, set the password for the user equal to the password that we generated, however it came about, and that's it. Then we save the user and either return it to the show page for that same user, the new current show page for that user, or we just redirect back to the same page with a flash message showing the error. So that's it. That's the store function. Now we just need to do the show function and the edit function, and we don't really need to worry about the destroy. And then with our edit function, we can go ahead and set it in because it's basically the exact same thing. We get the value for that user, and then we are going to manage it. We're going to send them to that view and pass in the user field. So now we need to go through and make forms for edit and for show. Okay, so there we go. That's the basics for just show. I don't have some fancy CRM page. There's only 2 pieces of information right now, so I just kind of need the bare minimum. Eventually, the most important thing will be having the roles, and we'll want the roles over here so we can see what role they are. And as the user, as we grow the application, we'll have more information we'll add here as well. Maybe things like payments or favorites or anything like that. We'll display those here for more information, but we just don't have that right now. So this is kind of a good basic start. Okay, so with that out of the way now, you can see we have the button here as well that goes to edit the user. So now let's go through and make the page for the edit the user. I'm basically going to copy the page for the entire page here for the create because it's going to be very, very similar for edit. So under users again, let's do new file. And then this time the form, we just want to go to update. Actually here, we got to make this post. And then I realized all these forms actually don't work. We have to go through and do CSRF tokens for all these forms. But for right now, okay, now when we get to the password field, we basically have 3 options and we can only pick one of these 3 options. So the first option is basically that we do not change the password. Okay, so we want to maybe have that option selected by default where you're just editing the information for the user, but you don't want to change their password. The second option that we have is we can generate a new automatically generated password. And the third option would be to generate a new password that is manually set by myself or by the administrator. So those are going to be basically the 3 options. We can't view or display the passwords the way we've engineered it, which is good. That's the way we want it to be. So we're not going to be able to display the password. It's hashed and encrypted in the database. But we can always set a new password. So those are kind of like our options. So in order to do that, instead of this checkbox system, what we're going to do instead is we're going to set up a radio box system. So let's go through and do that real quick. We'll do radio, the view with the radio box is the view again. Okay, so this will give us 3 different options. In fact, we've kind of messed up here. Each of these should be inside of its own field. Okay, so there we go. We got our 3 options. Now we do need one more option in our manually selected one. We basically want to move this field up. So what I did here is we just have our input field for the password, and we're going to want to change this basically, but we're going to display this field only when this checkbox is set. So we're going to do v-if, and then we're going to say if the model that we're using is password options, if password options equals manual, then we will display that to the user. Okay, so now that we got that created, we've got our button here to create the user. We want to just change this to edit. And then at the bottom, let's go through and make that view object again. Okay, so the default option is to keep it the same. So we'll have, this should be selected by default. Let's go ahead and try this in the browser. Missing required parameters, user. I think what it's saying is up here where we have users.update, we need to pass in the user ID as well, so it knows where to send it to. Let's try it again. Yep, that seems to have worked. Okay, so here we go. So the name is subscriber for this subscriber. We could edit it. There's their email, and then our options for password, we could do not display, do not change, auto generate, or we could manually set a new password. When we do that, then we have this option available. And then we click edit user, just like that. This should submit our form, and it will go to our update function. So the update function is the only thing we haven't done yet. Everything else is basically complete. Let's go ahead and set this up. We're going to just do some basic validation. Okay, so this is where we tell it basically we want to make it unique, but just to ignore the current ID. All right, so that's everything we need there. Now we've gone ahead and validated the request. Just like before, we do need to check what the value of this auto password was. This, what do we call it? Password options right here. We need to check the value of password options. If the value was keep, then we just ignore the password. If the value was auto, then we need to generate another password, do that again. And if the value was manual, then we need to set that equal to what the value was. So what we can do here is we can do user. We're going to do find or fail. We're just going to find the current user. And then we're going to go ahead and set the name equal to the name that was submitted, and then do the same thing for email. Now, the one part that's a little different is we need to also dynamically check that password. So we're going to say if request so the first thing we need to do is if the password was equal to auto, then we need to automatically generate the new password. So that's what we'll do here. We can actually just get the same code as up here. In another video, I'm going to show you guys how to make helpers, and we'll actually extract this out into a helper. But for right now, we'll just duplicate it. because I know that's going to come up. Usually I wouldn't duplicate it. This is the downside with doing all this stuff in video format, is like normally I would do all this in a slightly different order, but because I'm showing people, I got to do it slightly different. But like I said, so we'll have to come back here, unfortunately, but I'm going to copy it for now. That'll go there, and then we'll say else if, and we're going to say if the request for password options is equal to manual, then we're just going to set it equal to and then this will be equal to the value of what was submitted. And then otherwise, we actually can just leave it empty. So if it was equal to keep, we don't need to mess around with the password field. So we'll just not worry about it. So then from here, all we need to do is actually go ahead and save the user. All right, so there we go. So then we'll save the user and then redirect them back to the show page, or we'll redirect them back to the edit page and to tell them to try again. So, all right, so there we go. So now that we've got that set up, the last thing I want to do before we test it is let's make sure we're pulling in session. Let's also make sure we're pulling in hash. And otherwise, I think we're good. Yeah. Perfect. So let's go ahead and test it. Let's create a new user. Okay, so now let's go ahead and try to test this in the browser. So we're going to create a new user, give him a name, and we'll generate that user. There we go. It's successfully created. So we've got this is the user. Let's go ahead and edit the user. Let's give it a new name. Just like that. And we will edit the user. Sure enough, it looks like it all saved successfully. If we take a look in the actual database, we can see the user's information is here. There's their password. We're going to go through and auto-generate another password. Now it's kind of not set up so we can see the password directly. But what we will do is we can just see this hashed password change. So let's do that right now. Let's edit. And this time we're going to auto-generate a password. We're going to click edit. And now when I refresh this, you should see this change. So this first part won't change, but this part here should change. Oh, okay. So I'm looking back at my code. I actually never... This line here, we actually need to set it so it actually sets the password. It doesn't actually set the password. That's why it wasn't working. So we actually need to say user password equals, and now we've set the password. In this case, str. So here we set the actual new password. There we go. So now it should actually update. It seems like everything else was working except for that. Let's try this again. So now, once again, look in the database. This is the current hashed password, and then it should change here if we do auto-generate. Now we click edit. Okay, great. So we have that. And if we now look in the database, you can see that this changed. So this is a new password now. Okay, so that is basically what was needed to change all of that. And we now can do everything. We don't have delete set up yet, but everything else works for managing passwords. So the next part is actually doing what we set out to do 3 episodes ago, which is now getting all of the user roles and user permissions in here. And then we want to tie those to users. So that's the next goal now that we have a little bit of a user management system in the works, kind of being started here. So I know we went over a lot in today's video. It was really, really quick. A lot of it was super basic, so I jumped around a lot. It's stuff that there's not really a lot new to do. This is the same stuff you do in every single application. So anyway, I'm exhausted from doing this, so I'm going to go take a break, and I will see you guys tomorrow in the next video where we actually start being able to create roles and permissions, and then we'll tie those to the users.